I'm Reggie.
And we're originally from Brooklyn, and we are living part-time in South Africa. This is called the B side of South Africa because we're looking at the other side of South Africa. Those aspects that you either think about but no one talks about, or that you don't think about but we want to talk about. Today we're going to talk about the restrictions and also the freedoms that you find in South Africa that you might not find back at home in the United States.
Yep. Let's talk about sexual freedom, right? What have you observed here in South Africa as compared to the United States?
That's a good question. So I've found that in general, women are a little bit more modest here in South Africa. So it's two sides of the coin.
Yes, because I'm thinking about what we saw in the mall this morning.
I'm well past my 40s. I'm not gonna say my exact age, but I paused when I think about wearing shorts. Whereas back in Brooklyn, I wear shorts outside in the summertime. But here it does give me pause about being at my age and walking outside and wearing shorts, because you just don't see women at my age doing that. They don't dress that way. But that's not so much sexual freedom. That's sexual expression, I guess, or maybe not even sexual, but that's fashion freedom. But sexual freedom, okay. South Africa is one of the first countries on the continent to give complete and total freedom to the LGBTQ community.
There's restaurants,
yes,
bars.
and social situations. It's just like in the United States. They're completely out. They're completely free.
Yeah, very great.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because there are some countries here that you can get actually incarcerated. Yeah. You can be in jail for showing, if you're gay, lesbian, just for being who you are.
And what about self-expression in terms of what have you observed about self-expression? And you touched a little bit on it when you were just talking. Yeah,
definitely. Coming from New York City, you would think that you can't get into a city that's more self-expressive than New York City, but there are the women and men here are completely themselves. I've seen some of the freshest styles,
the style is amazing.
Hairstyles, clothing styles, just ways of being that's not based off of what you see on social media. You see some of that too. You see that that look, that makeup thing that
the Afrofuturism thing. Are you talking about Afrofuturism?
No, I'm talking about that makeup look that that makeup thing that everybody's doing now, the same look with the eyelashes.
You're talking about the
that look.
The Insta look is what I call it.
You definitely see that.
That Insta TikTok look.
Yeah, you definitely see that. But you also, on the same hand, in South Africa, which you might not see in places like Nigeria or Ghana, they rock the natural hairstyles. Like the women will wear a Caesar and a bald fade in a hot minute with the dopest cuts in their hair, and they look amazing. So this idea that you have to have long hair doesn't really exist in South Africa. If you want to, you can wear your weave, throw on your, whatever you want to wear, your what do you call them? The lace fronts. I'm sorry, I'm not up on that lingo. I've never had worn a wig or a lace front. But you can do that, braids, everything. So definitely self-expression.
Then what about the freedom in terms of being able to do business here? Do you feel that there's more freedom in being able to conduct business here, or do you find there's restricted?
So these are everything that he's asking me. These are all the freedoms. So yes, another one. Yes, this is a great freedom, is being able to do business here. I feel that you can actually make more progress here in many ways than in the United States. As an American, because of the novelty of us being Americans, because of the dollar, the strength of the dollar, for various reasons that we've talked about in other episodes.
You're right about that. I think about one of the first people we met here was this developer who developed these different precincts around South Africa, and a developer who's working on that scale, we would have a hard time even getting a conversation with in the United States. Based on the scale of that he works on, if I tried to have the same kind of outreach or try to have even a 5-minute conversation with a developer like that in the United States, I would never even get through the front door. But here, we were immediately able to connect with this developer, and even he had an offer of having us represent exclusively one of his developments, but then COVID happened, so that didn't happen. But the fact that that could happen from just a quick conversation and immediately being able to have dinner or lunch with this person and being able to solidify a relationship, we just don't have that kind of access in the United States. So, and this person was white, so it doesn't matter whether they're black or white, but again, having access to that American dollar and the American market is a huge incentive for people to come to the table to talk to you about business. What do you find in terms of like having access to food, fresh food, organic food? Is it harder to do that here, easier to do that here as compared to the United States?
So they do have an organic section that they still, you'll see that. But for the most part, the meats are fresher, the dairy is fresher, the vegetables, the fruit is grown here. And
it doesn't have all the preservatives, so things don't last as long. So you can't just buy stuff, go shopping at the beginning of the month. You really should be going shopping either daily or every other day or something like that. You get small amounts of things.
Right, like, they sell this fresh bread they make every single day for like 60 cents.
Yeah.
Fresh. Everything's fresh. Yeah, fresh.
Okay, right? And then thinking about in the context of these freedoms, the freedom of movement to get around and travel and things like that. What do you find here?
Well, that one is both a freedom and a restriction. Particularly in South Africa, it's not a walking city, so I can't necessarily get up and, if you're comparing it to Brooklyn, and just go to a bodega, there can be some fewer, more restrictions, I should say, in terms of like immediate mobility, but they do have public transportation here if you want to get around on the bus.
Uber.
And Uber it's all about that Uber life. Like you can literally go for 10 miles and it costs you $2 in Uber here. So that's pretty amazing. But even country, like being able to just get on a plane and for $89 go to, Botswana or Namibia, or pay $150 and you're in Kenya, like that type of freedom is amazing. Being able to just get around the continent. Yes. All right. So do you think that there are restrictions in terms of outdoor activities, or do you feel like that's a freedom, or do you feel like
the restrictions in terms of what?
Outdoor activities like running and,
So I think at least where we're staying in some of the suburbs outside of the Johannesburg Central District, they don't have a lot of sidewalk. It's built for cars, right? So it's more like LA, or it's more like the suburbs or the southern cities where there may not be a lot of sidewalk. So in that way, no, but if you want to do things like hiking, if you want to do outdoor activities, they have all of those things here and you'll be able to do them. If you're in a landlocked city like Johannesburg, there's no beaches, right? So if you want beach activities, you got to go to the coastal areas in order to enjoy beaches.
Not this past trip, but the trip before that we made to South Africa, we actually got stopped in our Uber at a checkpoint. How did that make you feel? Do you feel like that's a restriction that they do these checkpoints?
No, I think it's because I read about it, so I already knew what it was. They had this new policy where they were trying to get people who were not paying their electric and water bills. And one way to do that was to do these random traffic stops, and they would start catching people who had defaults on their electric and water bills.
That's what that was about?
That's what that was about, yeah. So I knew what it was about. So
that seems so bizarre.
Yeah.
To stop people because you're going to check if they're paying their bills.
But what happened was they ended up collecting a lot of the back money from that because people weren't paying their bills. So
all right, so let's talk about restrictions, Reggie. I'm gonna kind of put you in charge of that, of answering that.
South Africans do not play on the visa business. Like if you overstay your visa, you're going to be banned from this country from a big chunk of time.
Crazy,
maybe at least
you don't even want to overstay it for.
It's like 7 or 10 years. It's something like really harsh. And then it's not easy to get. They have different types of visas. Some are easier than others, like a retirement visa, if you can show you're getting a certain amount of income. Then they have business visas or wealth visas if you show you have a certain amount of money in the bank. But visa process is tricky, so that's one of the restrictions. But again, as a Black American, we get that automatic 90-day visa, but means that every 90 days you would have to leave the country, go to your home country, and come back.
What about one of the things that bother me, and I'll say this because it doesn't bother everybody, are the gated communities. Like most of the very nice houses are gated off. And it just reminded me of apartheid, how they were trying to keep Black folks on that side and, everybody else, i.e. white folks, on this side. And now that there's, integration in the country, you have a lot of folks from all around the country that are moving into these gated communities and even these housing complexes that have walls up high. Do you feel like that's a restriction to be living inside a gated community if like every nice community is gated?
I guess I don't think so, because United States has tons and tons of gated communities. Because we live in New York City, we don't encounter gated communities. So if you live in dense urban areas like New York City or Chicago, the rich and the poor are neck and neck with each other. We're next to each other on subways and public transportation. But outside of New York City, gated communities are a big thing in the United States. And that's really more about the haves and the have-nots. The haves wanting to keep the have-nots outside. So,
and that doesn't bother you?
Well, I didn't say it doesn't bother me in terms of it's not something that's new, me encountering here. When I see it here, I think about it. We have it in the United States. And it's not ideal because there's such a gap between the have and the have-nots. They're more prominent here. But again, in the United States, gated communities are a normal, regular thing. You know, people who have means tend to select gated communities to live in, and that, you know, that's a reality. And when you have that wealth disparity, so it's troubling that there's so much wealth disparity that the only way people who have money can feel is like they have to live in these gated communities. But that's really a result of the great disparity in terms of wealth, which we have in the United States.
So do you feel that you can come here? Do you have to get a South African phone number? Do you have to communicate on a South African phone? Or do you think that, because we ended up getting a number.
Yeah,
did you feel like that was a restriction that we ended up having to get a number?
I think in a way it is, certainly, but it was cheap enough to do, to get a SIM card and get a little cheap a burner phone here. But because there's some things, if you're going to live here, there are going to be things you have to do, like get a phone number, get a bank account, things like that, or else you can't do things like electricity, right? So to get our electric on in our apartment, you could only do it if you have a South African number. There's some other things that you're only going to be able to do from a business perspective if you have a South African bank account. So there are just going to be those requirements. And it's actually, again, similar to the United States. If you're coming to live in the United States and you have a number from another country, you're going to have to get a U.S. number, you're going to have to get a U.S. bank account. So it's definitely different from a person who's visiting than a person who's coming to stay long term. The longer you're going to stay or you plan to make roots here, then you're going to have to do those things.
Okay, so one more that I felt to be a restriction. Let me ask you how you felt.
Mm-hmm.
We're big Liberty fans, New York Liberty basketball, WNBA, and we're big Nets, Brooklyn Nets. And New York Knicks.
And New York Knicks.
Right. Yeah, so we were quite distressed when we weren't able to log on and watch the games.
Very stressful.
You know, we make assumptions that the CNNs and all of our major network cable shows that we'd be able to access them here, and that's not the fact at all. So watching TV and watching your favorite shows and accessing your news shows and, you know, your sports teams, do you feel like that was a restriction?
Yeah, that's definitely a restriction. So a lot of the programming available in the United States, especially that sports, the live sports, you want to see it real time, that's real tough. So I had to jerry rig here. You know, we got a VPN, and then with the VPN, then I had to get a subscription to like the Hulu, ESPN, and then they, you know, had to redirect that so that it's coming through the VPN so that we can see the games. And then the other restriction, sports you want to see live, and the time difference makes it really tough.
Yes,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, we wanted to see our Liberty play in their first championship winning game. And
started at 8 at Eastern time.
Yeah, so what time was that here?
That's like 2 o'clock in the morning.
It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we had to set an alarm to wake up.
Yes, we actually did that. We fell asleep and set an alarm, and Reggie was like, "Wake up! Liberty game's coming on."
So yeah, that's very. If you're a sports fan, it's going to be well, unless you can, you know, learn to love cricket and rugby and, you know, soccer, which are the big sports out here.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you may love those sports, but if you want to see basketball or NBA or things like that, you know, or if you're an NFL fan, you're going to have to really plan so that you can see your games.
Yeah.
And I think about those restrictions, they're not enough to make me not want to be here in South Africa.
Yeah.
And, you know, the freedoms and the advantages that you get here kind of balance it out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And if you have more questions around restrictions and freedoms, please drop them in the comments. We'd love to answer them. Maybe we'll do another episode on freedoms and restrictions. But yeah, I think we hit everything that we could think of.
In terms of what we've encountered.
Yeah.
You got to get a TV license when you buy a TV.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You can't just buy a TV. You gotta.
Get a
We went to the
license.
macro to buy a TV, and then they're like, "Wait a minute, do you have a license?" We were like,
Like
"A
a
license."
license.
You had to fill out all this paperwork and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and they had to give you a number, and you have to renew it, and you have to pay a fee
Yeah, I
just to buy a
completely
TV.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us for this latest episode on restrictions and freedoms.
Please like, subscribe, and share.
And comment if you
And comment, and you can comment, right? But be nice in the comments, because
Yes.
I block people.
And we'll see you for the next episode of B-Side. Peace.
Bye.